Welcome to Riga for the second Grand Prix of the season. And what better a location than the National Library of Latvia, known as the Castle of Light. Just like in Moscow, 16 players will compete in a knockout tournament. After all 4 Grand Prix are over, the top 2 ranked players gain a place in next year's Candidates Tournament. But before we immerse ourselves in all the action in Riga, let's rewind and take a look at what happened in Moscow back in May. The first Grand Prix of the season took place in Moscow in a famous building on the Gogol Boulevard, a location full of history where some of the biggest names in the sport have gone head-to-head for over a century. Among the participants, 7 Russians featured. We had some big surprises, including the first-round exit of top seed Anish Giri. Hikaru Nakamura and Radoslav Wojtaszek put on a solid performance, reaching the semi-finals, but it was 2 home favourites that reached the final, Alexander Grishuk and Ian Nepomniachtchi. In a neck-and-neck battle, both classic games finished in a tie as they moved into the tiebreakers. And it was there that Ian Nepomniachtchi got the better of his compatriot to seal victory. A fantastic display from the 3rd seed and number 6 in the world, who could book his place in the Candidates Tournament with a couple of good results in the remaining Grand Prix. Nepomniachtchi had an extremely difficult route to the final, beating Levon Aronian in the first round, followed by the junior world number 1 Wei Yi. In the semis, in the longest game of the tournament, he disposed of Radoslav Wojtaszek after 6 hard-fought games. Finally, he took out fellow Russian Alexander Grishuk. This is what the rankings look like after the Moscow Grand Prix. Only the top 8 players get points, with Grandmasters beaten in round 1 scoring nothing. But how will the standings change after the second Grand Prix in Riga?
Every player here from the top 45 in the world, so in a good day, anybody can make it all the way to the finals.
21 players take part in these Grand Prix tournaments, with each Grandmaster playing in 3 of the 4 competitions. 5 players are making their Grand Prix debut here in Riga: Frenchman Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, David Navara from the Czech Republic, China's Yang Yi Yu, Pentala Harikrishna from India, and last but not least, Veselin Topalov. After skipping Moscow, these 5 will play the remaining 3 Grand Prix. The format is the same for all 4 Grand Prix. The players compete in 2 classic games with 90 minutes, plus 30 seconds per move. After move 40, players gain an additional 30 minutes. In the event of a tie, the Grandmasters then play faster games on day 3. Firstly, 2 games at 25 minutes apiece and a 10-second increment per move. If they're still level, we move on to 2 10-minute games with a 10-second increment per move. Should the players still be tied after that, 2 Blitz Games are played, 5 minutes each and 3 seconds per move. If we still have a deadlock at that point, we move on to a decisive game called Armageddon. White has 1 more minute than Black but is forced to win. Should Black win, or if there's a draw, the player with the black pieces qualifies for the next round. At the end of each Grand Prix, the players score points depending on their final position that go towards the general classification. If a player qualifies without going to a draw, they're awarded a 1-point bonus. At the end of the 4 Grand Prix, the first 2 players in the general classification qualify for the Candidates Tournament. The winner of that moves into the final of the World Championship against the defending champion Magnus Carlsen. We take a look at the draw for the first round, where top seed Anish Giri takes on Kaioken, Wesley So goes up against Hari Krishna, while Peter Svidler faces Duda. Dubov goes head-to-head with Mamedyarov, Grishuk faces Vityugov, Yu Yangyi takes on Levon Aronian, Nakamura against Topalov, and finally David Navara against Vachier-Lagrave. Frenchman Maxime Vachier-Lagrave takes on David Navara from the Czech Republic. Both are playing in their first Grand Prix and will play the next 3 tournaments. Vachier-Lagrave is the favourite because despite his ability in classic matches, he's also exceptional at a faster pace. In fact, he's rated number 1 in the world in Blitz Games. The Frenchman starts with white and both men play their usual opening. We enter the 2-knight variation of the Kaioken defense. Vachier-Lagrave surprises his opponent playing Queen F4 on move 9. It's the same move a member of his team played some months ago. Surprisingly, Navara isn't ready for this and starts to think a lot, failing to restore balance. White's position is better, and Vachier-Lagrave wins a piece and then seals his victory in 19 moves in under less than an hour and a half. In Game 2, Navara must win to level the match. the players enter a Sicilian defense. Navarra goes for a Moscow variation. However, it's the Frenchman who's comfortable, sacrificing a pawn and eventually obtaining a draw. With that, he's through to the quarter-finals. Danil Dubov, extremely entertaining in the first Grand Prix, takes on 4th seed Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, who's under pressure and must perform in this tournament to keep his hopes of finishing in the top 2 alive. The game promises to be explosive with 2 aggressive players.
My last chance, if I want to qualify candidates, I need to play here good. I just will try and forget Moscow and forget last tournaments, how to say, because it's not good results, but I hope is Riga will change my results. Normally, I love Riga.
Dubov plays a variation of the Queen's Gambit Tarrasch defense, a variation he used against Nakamura in the last Grand Prix. But Mamedyarov is prepared, taking advantage of his bishops and a better pawn structure. Dubov's dynamic compensations are good. It's an interesting game, and after a big battle, the game ends in a draw after a perpetual check. In Game 2, we witness a Grunfeld defense in which the players enter an endgame that seems balanced, but the Azerbaijani pushes on, pressurizing Dubov with a passed pawn on the A-file and then taking one of his opponent's pawns. After a long sequence of moves, Mamedyarov gains another pawn, forcing Dubov to give up. Mamedyarov moves on.
I think he played very well. I mean, basically he did what you normally need to do in such a position. Like, obviously, if you push a pawn immediately when I have 30 minutes, then most probably it will be a draw. So you basically try to keep pressure and you try to keep all the pawns, like, yeah, on h7 and e6. I mean, till I'm in time trouble, and then you try to win. I think he actually played very well.
Next up, Alexander Grishuk takes on his compatriot Nikita Vityugov. Vityugov has frequently been selected to form part of the Russian team in international competitions such as the Chess Olympiads, where he recently won a bronze medal. Grishuk went all the way to the final in the Moscow Grand Prix and is the strong favorite in this matchup.
It's just you play match after match and doesn't matter what happened before, just you want to win every match you play. So it's not like, let's say, a round robin tournament and you can say, okay, 50% would be okay. I mean, it's not like this here, so it doesn't matter.
Game 1 sees complications early on. Vityugov goes for a sharp 4th move, knight g5, within the 2 knights defense opening. From there, we witness what can only be described as a chaotic position. Grishuk is once again making a big impression, moving into a great situation, but failing to deliver the final blow. Vityugov defends well and scrapes a draw. In Game 2, Grishuk offers a draw at an early stage, postponing the battle to the faster games, where he's more comfortable. In the rapid games, Grishuk starts with white and the players enter a Queen's Gambit. The world number 7 sacrifices a pawn and is developing an attack on the Queen's side. He unleashes a devastating attack on the opposing king. A magnificent move, sacrificing a bishop on move 20 is the nail in the coffin. None of the black pieces can aid the king. White continue with rook g5 and queen h5. Vityugov gives up on move 23. In the second heat, Vityugov opens with d4 as opposed to e4. Grishuk responds with a Tarrasch defense. He ends up with an isolated pawn but with active pieces to compensate. Grishuk takes a pawn, turning what looked to be a draw into a win. The Russian is in the quarter-finals.
I don't know. I mean, I probably should learn basic rules of chess. So first of all, save king. So, not too much to say.
Yeah, but actually even in this game, although it lasted only 23 moves, I managed to make a very considerable mistake, bishop h4. Yeah, white should take on c7 and play knight e5, then white is much better.
Wesley So takes on Pentala Hari Krishna. So was ousted in the quarter-finals in Moscow by Alexander Grishuk, but remains a strong favourite in Riga. Hari Krishna didn't play in Moscow, but will be looking to get off to a good start as he makes his debut here. He's the Indian number 2 behind legendary player Vishy Anand. The players compete in a well-known variation of the Guoco piano. The game is even, but Hari Krishna decides to unbalance the game, sacrificing a knight to launch an attack on the white king. So accepts the sacrifice and defends in order to try and gain an advantage later. In a decisive move, So sacrifices his queen to defend, but has 2 knights and a rook against the opposing queen, a big advantage. So should win, but makes a mistake before the 40th move. The Indian player capitalizes, finding a perpetual check to save a draw. Game 2 sees a Catalan opening take place, in which pieces are exchanged swiftly. A draw is agreed after 29 moves. At 1 point apiece, we move to the rapid games. So has the white pieces as the players immerse themselves in an Italian defense once again. This time So switches it up, avoiding the exchange of the light-squared bishops. Hari Krishna seizes the opportunity to occupy the center of the board with his pawns, but after exchanging the pawn on e4 with the one on d5, the structure becomes unbalanced. Hari Krishna sacrifices a piece to try and trap the opposing queen. He achieves this, but at a high cost, like in the first game between the 2 players. Bit by bit, So improves his position as time runs out. The American continues to collect his opponent's pawns, and thanks to a small combination, he wins after a grueling battle. In the following game, we witness another Catalan opening, and once again So is meticulous. Pieces are exchanged in under 30 moves as we enter a rook endgame. The game ends in a draw. So moves on after a dominant display.
Well, actually, I should have taken bishop takes d5, and I don't know why I took knight d5 and I missed queen e4. But then I think white should be better somehow. I mean, but okay, it's rapid, so it's not possible to calculate everything.
We'll be back after the break to see the rest of the Riga Grand Prix first round matches. Hikaru Nakamura, a semi-finalist in Moscow, takes on the oldest man in the tournament, Bulgaria's Veselin Topalov, who won the FIDE World Championship back in 2005. Despite not being active anymore, the Bulgarian was a player of sheer class and is a danger to any grandmaster. Nakamura starts with white and opens with e4. We enter one of the main lines of the Ruy Lopez, and the American decides to avoid the Marshall Gambit. The game has a deja vu feel to it. Nakamura follows the footsteps of Garry Kasparov. In 2004, Kasparov played the same first 19 moves against Topalov. Unlike Kasparov, Nakamura fails to mount a powerful attack on the king's side, and pieces are exchanged. After 39 moves, we have a draw. In Game 2, Topalov also opens with e4 as the game is fairly open. The 2 players go head-to-head in an Italian game and agree on a draw quickly after just 25 moves. All will be decided in the rapid games, which on paper favour Hikaru Nakamura. Nakamura starts with white, and this time round he doesn't want to go into theoretical lines. But Topalov plays logically with a double fianchetto, preventing white's development on the queen's side. After the opening, the Bulgarian improves with active pieces. Nakamura defends methodically, gradually simplifying the position, and after 50 moves the players draw. In the next game, Topalov tries to tip the scales in his favour with white in another Italian opening. Topalov occupies the centre and has a small advantage on the queen side as he takes possession of the open A-file. Nakamura is under pressure and decides to exchange queens, but creates a weakness with his pawns. Topalov seizes the opportunity, attacking a weak pawn on b6. Already in a losing position, Nakamura gifts his knight. Topalov stuns the American, surprising everyone to move into the next round.
Obviously, I thought Hikaru was the big favorite in the rapid. So, but okay. Second game, I think at some point I got position I liked, maybe slightly better, and then I don't believe I played always the best moves, but okay, it was this big mistake at the end that decided the game.
I mean, okay, I played a very bad game, I think, in the second game. In general, I mean, playing queen b6 was crazy. I mean, should have just played bishop c6, but then even after that, it should have been fine if I don't go f5. If I go just king g8, king f7, white's better, but I think should be fine. And then I just played this f5, missing that Veselin did not have to like defend the pawn. He could just basically bring his king in, and then, I mean, then it's just lost, I think.
Peter Svidler, beaten in the quarterfinals in Moscow, takes on Jan-Krzysztof Duda. A big age gap here as Svidler, 43, takes on the youngest player in the tournament, Duda, who's just 21. Svidler has been playing at the top level for years and had beaten Garry Kasparov before Duda was even born. Svidler starts with white and plays e4. Duda responds with e5. In order to avoid the Petrov defense, the 43-year-old plays a bishop's opening. The battle unfolds swiftly after the Russians' 8th move, queen g5. The position becomes extremely complex. Duda leaves his rook on h8 in a vulnerable position, but attacks knight h4, threatening to play queen c1. Svidler has a rook and a pawn against a bishop and a knight. A fairly balanced situation. After more simplifications, a draw is agreed after an entertaining match. The following day, Duda, with the white pieces, plays a move in order to avoid Svidler's trademark Grunfeld defense. Instead, we witness a King's Indian defense. In another interesting game, both players have assets. The Russian tries to develop play on the king side, but in the end, it's another draw as we move into the tiebreaks. Svidler starts with white, and this time round he agrees to get involved with the bulletproof Petrov defense of his Polish opponent. In the first 10 moves of the game, the players follow the 11th match of last year's World Championship final between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. Svidler deviates on move 11 with bishop g5. The Russian takes a pawn, but blacks have good compensation with a strong dark-squared bishop. Both players are struggling for time, and Svidler's king is more exposed. In a battle against the clock, Duda recovers his pawn, but Svidler escapes with his king. In a frantic finale to the game, both players have under 30 seconds and advance with their passed pawns. But the queens are exchanged and a draw is agreed. Now with white, Duda accepts to challenge Svidler's Grunfeld defense. The Polish player uses his pair of bishops well, advancing on the opposing king. Svidler exchanges queens in order to try and neutralize his opponent's attack, but he doesn't quite manage to escape. Both players are running out of time, and everything can change in a move. Svidler defends himself very well, but Duda manages to gain a pawn and will try to capitalize on this advantage. The 21-year-old manages to create a mating net and wins after 69 moves. The youngest man in the tournament is through to the quarterfinals. After king f3, black cannot defend due to a series of threats. There's no escape.
In the white game, I think I got a very promising position out of the opening, but I completely misevaluated this position with an extra pawn. I could have just played after rook e8. I'm not at all forced to take the pawn, but I thought, okay, it feels, I mean, the bishop on f6 is active, but I have a healthy extra pawn and I should be able to consolidate. And apparently I've spoken to my friends in the break, and I'm just not better at all there. So the decision to just go for this operation was wrong, and that was basically my one chance in the entire match.
Duda highlighted how his match in Moscow against Wesley So helped him prepare this time round.
Yeah, probably yes, because again, in the match against Wesley, I think we played, actually every game was bad, I think. Here I was basically more or less in control all the time. I mean, I got good positions and yeah, so perhaps it was the case. Also I know that Peter would be very tough because he's very experienced in knockout format and I'm not, so okay, I just wanted to play some best chess I could, and I think I more or less did it.
Top seed Anish Giri takes on Sergei Kaioken next, with both players looking to make amends after their early exits in Moscow. It's a fairy tale matchup as Giri looks to get past Kaioken, an extremely difficult opponent with nerves of steel.
Usually I take my last result with me a little bit. And my last tournament, I started badly, but I finished very well. So I feel optimistic now because I finished it very well. But obviously every tournament is different, so let's see if my positive feelings will work out.
The players draw in the classic matches as Kaioken will try and overcome the top seed in the rapid games. This time Giri goes for the Naidov variation of the Sicilian defense. Kaioken replies with bishop d3 on move 6. The Russian takes the advantage by advancing most of his pawns on the queen side, while black's counter-attack is slower to set up. Giri tries to complicate the game, and after a tactical phase, the opposite colour bishops make their appearance, but Kaioken has a strong passed pawn. The Russian takes a pawn, paralysing his opponent's pieces, and after a nice last move, Giri has no alternative but to give up. In the second rapid game, Giri starts with an English opening that quickly transitions into variants of the Catalan defence. The Dutchman plays fast, putting Kaioken under pressure against the clock. Giri creates a passed pawn, which reaches the 7th row. With 10 minutes remaining against just 30 seconds, such a position is impossible to defend. Kaioken gives up after 51 moves and Giri levels the match. We move into another tiebreaker of even faster games now. The deadlock remains after 4 more games, 2 with 10 minutes apiece and 2 Blitz Games. Both players had chances, but in a thrilling first round match, all will be decided in the Armageddon Tiebreaker. Armageddon is a special format used as a last resort. In this format, White have 5 minutes compared to Black's 4 minutes, but White must win the game. A win or draw for Black puts them through to the next round.
In Armageddon, basically I would take Black if I would have to decide, because for me it's psychologically easier to play for 2 results than for 1. But I know that many players prefer White, so it's probably a matter of taste. I don't know.
Despite Kaioken's preference to play with Black, he's drawn white pieces and will have to do his best. We witness a Slav defense opening. The Russian takes a bishop, hoping this will help him win later on. His advantage improves after move 28 as he takes advantage of a pin. He mates his opponent on the 34th move. What a match! And what a way for Kaioken to book his place in the quarterfinals as we take a look at how he ended the game.
I like very much to play Blitz and Rapid. I mean, I really enjoy because when I play classic games, it's a hard job. Of course, I'm trying my best, but it's very difficult. But in Rapid and Blitz, I just enjoy. I play, I try. Okay, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it works.
Yang Yu makes his Grand Prix debut and he's up against the experienced Levon Aronian. Aronian, ranked 14th in the world, lost in the first round in Moscow against the eventual winner Ian Nepomniachtchi. And just like Mamedyarov, Giri and Kaioken, he must do well in Riga if he wants to qualify for the candidates tournament. Aronian starts with white and plays an exchange variation against his opponent's Slav defense in an attempt to limit risk, but Yu plays accurately and a draw is agreed after 29 moves. Game 2 also ends in a fairly quick draw as the players will meet for a tiebreak on day 3. Once again, in the 25-minute and 10-minute games, the players drew 4 times. Neither player has had an issue with Black. Aronian clashed with Yu's Slav defense without much success. We move now to the Blitz Games. Aronian with white faces Yu's Slav defense again, but this time round the Chinese player doesn't manage to balance the game completely. The white queen is more active and the Armenian player begins to attack his opponent's pawns. He takes a pawn on move 23 and is close to victory. Both players battle against the clock. Yu plays well and should be able to scrape a draw, but when the Chinese player has done the hardest part, Aronian snatches the win. The first victory comes after 7 games. Yu must now win to level the match. This time the players enter a complicated variation of the Nimzo-Indian defense. Things are going well for the Armenian, who sacrifices an exchange to create 2 connected passed pawns. Yu sacrifices a bishop to stop the march of the opposing pawns. The Chinese player tries to attack the Black King as time is running low for both players. Somehow Yu manages to create a mating net without letting his opponent create a perpetual check. In a turn of events, the players are level again, and we move to the Armageddon Tiebreaker. Aronian has white in the final game of this series and must win to qualify, but unlike Kaioken against Giri, Aronian struggles. Yu intelligently exchanges all his pieces with the Armenian with just a few seconds remaining as he books his place in the quarterfinals. Another surprise as Aronian, just like Giri, waves goodbye to a top 2 spot. After the break, we take a look at the quarterfinals as the 8 remaining Grandmasters battle it out for a spot in the last 4. Round 1 is over and the quarter-final table is complete. Kaioken will face Wesley So, while Mamedyarov goes up against Duda. Moscow finalist Alexander Grishuk takes on Yang Yu, while Topalov will battle it out with Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. To the quarter-finals, where Veselin Topalov takes on Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, known as MVL. Topalov declared that he was surprised to reach this stage of the tournament, and he starts aggressively, accepting to take on the Naidov variation of the Sicilian Defense. The game is complicated, and the Bulgarian sacrifices a knight for 2 pawns early on. White has a lot of potential, given the fact that the Black King will have trouble finding a safe shelter. That being said, this is the kind of position that MVL excels in. He may be the best in the world at calculating variations. Both players have chances, but Topalov makes a mistake around move 40, allowing the Frenchman to exchange a rook and enter a solid endgame. Vachier plays well, sacrificing a pawn to create a passed pawn. Bit by bit, he improves his position and gets the win. In game 2, there's no real fight. Both players fail to develop play and a draw is agreed after just 12 moves. The Frenchman books his place in the semi-finals.
White had many options, and at some point I had a very promising position. I don't think I played the best moves, but again at some point I was probably better. And he defended well and I missed many moves at the end, so what to do? I had my chances.
Vachier spoke on his previous 2 games in which he qualified without the need for any tiebreakers, thus gaining 2 bonus points in the overall standings.
Well, against David, I got an opening disaster. So he played, I think, 1 or 2 terrible moves, and then it was just over. And yesterday it was a very fighting game where we both had our chances, and in the end I won. But the position was very complicated.
Yang Yiyu and Alexander Grishuk meet for the second quarter-final. Both classic games go to a draw, meaning a place in the semi-finals will be decided by the rapid games. Against the Queen's Pawn game, Yu doesn't replay the Slav defense. Instead, he goes for an orthodox Queen's Gambit. Grishuk plays the variation Bishop f4 on move 5. The game is balanced, but Yu makes a mistake by playing Bishop b4. Grishuk takes the upper hand, capitalizing on a pin on the knight. To save his piece, the Chinese player must accept the loss of a pawn, as we enter a knight endgame, in which his chances of escaping are slim. Grishuk continues his assault, taking another pawn before promoting a pawn of his own, 1-0 to the Russian. In the second rapid game, Grishuk just needs to draw, and opts for a solid variation of the Nimzo Indian defense. He exchanges his bad bishop, and blocks the queen side. Pieces are exchanged, and we enter another knight endgame. The game doesn't last much longer, as the same moves are repeated 3 times. Grishuk moves on and will meet Vachier in the semi-finals. After 2 draws in the classic games, Mamedyarov and Duda meet again in the tiebreakers. Duda decides to play a Meron variation in the semi-Slav defense. Mamedyarov tries to gain a slight edge, but the Polish Grandmaster defends well. However, Duda makes a mistake on move 18 by playing Rook d8. This allows Mamedyarov to deliver a combination and take the upper hand. After bishop takes e5, queen takes e5, knight takes h7, Duda cannot take h7, as that would allow white to take the unprotected rook on d8. That's why the 21-year-old decides to sacrifice his queen for 2 rooks to try and save this compromised position. Mamedyarov is in a better situation, but Duda battles back from the abyss, playing extremely fast. Nothing is clear at this stage, and Mamedyarov creates a perpetual check as the players draw. In game 2, Duda opens with his opponent's speciality, an aggressive variation in which he advances on the king side while leaving his king in the center. But the Azerbaijani knows the position well. He doesn't panic and knows exactly how to proceed.
For me, it's very easy to play because I play every time this line, rook g1, g4 attacks, and after every game I check and engine says very bad positions, very bad attacks, every time.
The game becomes brutal, but once again Mamedyarov benefits from the situation. He puts a strong knight on b4 and starts to infiltrate Duda's position. The Polish player has a series of problems, including a very exposed king. Mamedyarov ends with a strong sacrifice to conclude his attack and seal a spot in the semi-finals.
It was probably too much, but okay, it's easy to say afterwards that it was my idea, of course, but it's also risky not to risk at all.
Kaioken meets Wesley So in the last quarter-final, and the players draw their first 6 games, meaning it'll all come down to the Blitz matches. So fills us in on why the players are so closely matched.
We were trying both with the white pieces. The thing is, we have very similar repertoire against 1e4. So, Sergei has played hundreds of games with the Berlin with black, so it's very difficult to find something.
In the first Blitz game, So starts with an English opening instead of one e4. But Kaioken is at ease, playing quickly and with precision. The Russian takes the advantage with bishop g4, and So is forced to sacrifice his queen for 2 pieces in order to defend himself.
I have get the bishop pair and a pawn or two for the queen. And for the Blitz game, anything goes. So you have Blitz game, you can get a winning position, but if you make one blunder, then you can completely turn the tables.
So manages to complicate things for his Russian opponent, preventing Kaioken from taking the win. In a magnificent turn of events, not only does So defend himself, he turns the situation around. The American coordinates his pieces well and isolates the black king. In the end, he's going to take Kaioken's queen. What a win for So.
I feel a bit pity because for the first time in this tournament I played very precisely in the opening. I remembered all the moves, bishop g4, e4, and finally I lost.
In the second Blitz game, Kaioken must win and he goes all out, taking big risks. Both players have their moments, but So takes the upper hand once again. Kaioken refuses to give up and turns things around, creating a chance to win. But the Russian can't convert, as So creates a perpetual check to confirm the draw. Great work from the American, who sets up a semi-final against Mamedyarov. We take a look at the table, where So meets Azerbaijan's Mamedyarov, while Maxime Vachier-Lagrave will battle it out with Alexander Grishuk. Vachier starts the match with white and opens with his usual e4. Grishuk opts for a solid Berlin defense of the Rue Lopez. Since the match between Kasparov and Kramnik 2 decades ago, this variation is played frequently at a grandmaster level. In fact, even Google's super chess program AlphaZero uses this variation. Vachier enters the endgame swiftly, as he tends to do. Grishuk's position is slightly better, but the Russian seems content with a draw. This allows Vachier to take the initiative with the unexpected rook d3, which puts Grishuk under pressure.
And I just thought, okay, bishop g5, okay, just force a draw, and because I thought instead of rook d3, just, I don't know, rook e1, rook d1, and okay, just a draw. And then I even offered a draw, and then Maxim started to think, I was like, what is he thinking about? And then rook d3 came, and yeah. And after this, black is almost lost. I think this b5, b4, a4 I found the only chance, because for half an hour I actually thought maybe since my draw offer was not taken, I will just resign, because it looked completely hopeless.
Despite being in trouble, the Russian defends with precision. After more exchanges, Grishuk manages to save a draw. What an entertaining start to the semi-final.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there was a win, but I couldn't find it, and so in the end it just petered out to a draw.
In game 2, Grishuk decides to surprise his opponent early on. He plays h4 on move 3 of the game, preventing the Frenchman from entering lines of the Grunfeld defense. MVL is fairly surprised by the Russian's approach and decides to sacrifice a pawn, entering a kind of Benko gambit. Blacks are down a pawn, but in exchange, they can create some pressure on the queen side, obtaining some practical chances. But once again, Grishuk plays the opening well and appears to be in a better position until he makes an inaccurate move on move 15 by playing rook e1. Vachier starts to target d3 and wants to infiltrate the Russian space. The position becomes extremely complicated, and it's the Frenchman that finds a superb sequence of moves which allow him to enter a superior endgame. It's not over for Grishuk, but MVL has very active rooks, and the white king is fairly unprotected and vulnerable. Vachier increases the pressure on Grishuk, who just cannot restore balance. And in the end, the Frenchman wins without having to play tiebreakers for the 3rd time in Riga. Grishuk gives us his thoughts after the match.
I think rook e1 was a quite stupid move by me. It was the reason for this was a simple oversight. I thought I wanted to play knight b5, but then I couldn't see that after queen b7, bishop g5, bishop take b2, the rook on a3 is protected by the knight, so I can play bishop e7. And I think I have a considerable advantage after knight b5. Yeah, and after rook e1, yeah, it just became completely random.
That being said, Grishuk had nothing but praise for his opponent.
I think it was a fantastic game by Maxim, at least it looks to me right now.
The second semi-final sees Wesley So take on Azerbaijan's Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Mamedyarov plays a Catalan opening against So's Queen's Gambit. The Azerbaijani Grandmaster plays the opening fast, having prepared this variation extremely well. But Wesley So is also in familiar territory. In fact, in 2016, he beat Hikaru Nakamura convincingly using this very variation. So tries to better his pass game against Nakamura by playing Rook b6, but Mamedyarov then plays a theoretical novelty. So has to think long and hard, and he cannot find the best way to reply. He makes a mistake with c3, and Mamedyarov benefits, finding himself with a rook and two bishops against So's two rooks. Mamedyarov does not waste the opportunity and converts his advantage to a win seamlessly.
Well, c3 was a blunder. I mean, probably loses right away. I mean, I didn't check after game, but obviously c3 is a blunder. I mean, Shaq told me knight takes c4 was okay for black, but it looks very complex. Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to go for this line with black pieces while not being fully prepared.
In game 2, Mamedyarov goes for a Queen's Gambit accepted opening in order to play with a symmetrical pawn structure.
I was very happy with my positions. It was very solid, and I think after the opening, no problems.
Pieces are exchanged, and So tries his luck in a Queen endgame. A draw seems like the most likely result, but the slightest mistake can be fatal in these positions. But Mamedyarov is up to the task, calculating every move with precision. Wesley So's king cannot avoid a perpetual check. That means the players draw, and after a disappointing first Grand Prix, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov seals a spot in the final.
Yeah, it's hard to come back after losing the first game. And and Shaq played very well, and I think he completely deserved to win the match, and all the best in the finals.
We'll be back after the break to see who wins this epic final between Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. After almost 2 weeks in action in Riga, it all comes down to this moment, the final, where Maxime Vachier-Lagrave takes on Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. We take a look at the head-to-head between these two players. Despite being ranked below MVL, Mamedyarov has the upper hand in their past encounters, although when it comes to blitz and rapid games, Vachier does hold a narrow advantage. Both players have performed well, but the final is important as the winner will score 3 points more than the runner-up in the rankings. That would allow the victor to take the lead in the overall standings. In Game 1, Mamedyarov is white and Vachier defends with a Grunfeld defense. The two players have already faced each other with this opening on 8 occasions, and Mamedyarov has never won in this setup. But that doesn't faze the Azerbaijani, as he plays Queen A3 on move 8. Vachier faced this same move 4 years ago against Sebastian Bogner, and he plays the same way today. Mamedyarov improves on the game played by Bogner though, as he comes up with a novelty with Bishop F4, a move he may well have prepared specifically for this meeting.
Well, it's the case for most people, but you can be a target in the Berlin, in the Marshall, but of course, maybe in the Grunfeld it's more like more concrete, and of course there's a lot of stuff to remember.
Mamedyarov plays fast and forces a mistake out of his French opponent. MVL takes his knight out of play by placing it on A5 as opposed to D4. Under pressure, Vachier tries to change the course of the game. He allows his opponent's pawn to advance to D6, so he can play F6 followed by E5. But Mamedyarov prevents him from doing this with E5 followed by an excellent move, E takes F6, giving the Azerbaijani Grandmaster an advantage. Mamedyarov is in the zone, and after another great move, MVL can't prevent the opposing queen from getting to the D5 square. With that, Mamedyarov takes the pawn on E5 and opens the lines against Vachier's king. The Frenchman has to give up, and now has to win the second classic game if he wants to keep hope of victory in Riga alive.
Well, must-win situation is never pleasant, but I'll just be ready to play for as long as it takes.
Vachier doesn't replay the Rui Lopez opening he went for in the semi-finals. Instead, he tries his luck with an Italian opening. He goes for a Giocco piano and exchanges bishops early on. It's a surprising choice by the Frenchman, as the position is fairly symmetrical, but there are some assets for white. His knight is well placed on c4 and Mamedyarov's queen is somewhat out of play. The Azerbaijani, perhaps surprised by Vachier's slow game, thinks for 10 minutes and then plays knight d7, a move that gives the initiative to white. MVL doesn't squander the opportunity, playing d4 through the middle. Mamedyarov, without much space, has the choice of staying strong and defending his position, or playing dynamically but with more risk. He chooses the second option, and MVL seizes the opportunity, activating his two knights by creating threats against both a weak pawn and his opponent's king. MVL improves further after playing f3, a solid move which allows him to defend the pawn on e4, while also transferring his queen to the king side via f2 and g3. Mamedyarov is in serious trouble. He tries to defend, but Vachier takes a pawn and then converts his advantage into a win. The Frenchman levels the score in a nail-biting final as we move into the tiebreaks. After a draw in the first rapid game, the players cross paths again in another Italian game. But this time Mamedyarov has no issues and finds a comfortable position. The players enter the endgame, and it's here that Vachier plays well, advancing with his f-pawn. He creates a passed pawn as Mamedyarov is in a tricky position. The Azerbaijani Grandmaster decides to sacrifice a piece to try and hold a draw, but Vachier is winning. However, the Frenchman fails to find the best moves as Mamedyarov survives and begins taking out his opponent's pawns. Despite his extra knight, MVL can't get the win. Still no winner in the final after two fast games. In the two 10-minute games, the players draw again as we move into the Blitz matches. Vachier plays the same way he did in the second classic game, where he leveled the match, but Mamedyarov has had time to analyze the variation before the tiebreakers and changes on move 13 by playing a4 as opposed to knight e7. He wants to prevent MVL from occupying space on the queen side. Mamedyarov's position is a lot better than in the game a couple of days ago, as he now controls the only open file on the chessboard, and he decides to infiltrate Vachier's territory, threatening his king. Mamedyarov cuts off all possible escapes for the white king and wins with black. Vachier is now forced to win with black if he wants to push the match to one last tiebreaker. He doesn't go for the Grunfeld defense. Instead, he plays a double fianchetto to keep the position as complex as possible. Queens are exchanged early on, but Vachier activates his pieces, creating multiple threats. The Frenchman gains a pawn but is yet to convert his material advantage into a win. Mamedyarov tries to weather the storm, making Vachier's task as difficult as possible, but the Frenchman finds the right moves eventually and wins the game. What an incredible final we're witnessing. After 8 games, the winner of the Riga Grand Prix will be decided in the Armageddon Tiebreaker. Vachier-Lagrave has drawn white pieces, meaning he has 5 minutes against his opponent's 4, but he must win. For the first time in the tournament, the Frenchman changes his first move, playing knight f3 instead of e4. We move into a King's Indian defense. Players are obliged to play extremely quickly. In the endgame, Vachier tries to attack Mamedyarov's weak pawns and create a passed pawn, but Shakhriyar maintains the balance with his active pieces. In a breathtaking last phase of the game, with both players under pressure from the clock, Mamedyarov gains a pawn as we take a look at the last moments of the match. Mamedyarov wins the Riga Grand Prix. He needed 9 games to overcome Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, but he got the job done eventually in an astonishing final.
Of course, it was very interesting. I think one of the best matches. Both got a very good chance to win, to lose, to draw, everything. I mean, we play very good chess. Of course, in second game when in rapid, he got very good chance to win, but he cannot find this bishop f5 move. But of course, I'm very happy to win some tournaments after a long time. After my son, I never win tournament, and I back in Grand Prix. I mean, I have some good chance again to qualify for candidates. Okay, I will try, and congrats Maxim also for a very good tournament. He played really very good.
we take a look at Mamedyarov's path to victory, where he got past Dubov, Duda and So before the incredible final against Vachier Lagrave. The two finalists are on stage for the closing ceremony in the Latvian capital. A splendid performance from Mamedyarov sees him crowned as the winner. Vachier Lagrave also played extremely well and still has a big chance of qualifying for the candidates tournament. To the overall standings, where after 2 Grand Prix, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov tops the table. Joining him on 10 points is Alexander Grishuk, whose consistency has paid off so far. Nepomniachtchi, winner of the Moscow Grand Prix, and Vachier Lagrave, a 3rd and 4th, and will both play the remaining 2 tournaments in Hamburg and Tel Aviv. We'll be back in November for the 3rd Grand Prix of the season, which takes place in the German city of Hamburg. Once again, 16 Grandmasters will fight for victory and take one step closer towards next year's candidates tournament.